it's 5.5. When you square that, you get 30.25. Okay, and that is going to factor into x plus 5.5 squared. So it's always factoring, the trinomial square is always factoring into what half of this was. Okay, so over here, negative 10, when you square it, or I'm sorry, negative 10, you take half of that, that's negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. And this would factor into x minus 5 squared. Okay. And for negative 3, for the last one, you're going to take half of 3, which is 1.5. And you're going to take 1.5 times 1.5. That gives you 2.25. Okay. So this is just what's called completing the square, is forcing this trinomial to become a trinomial square. Now, when we're solving by completing the square, you can see the left side. It's a quadratic, which we learned that word in chapter 5. But it is not a trinomial square. And the last thing we did before break was we learned that what it was if it was. This time it wasn't. So the first thing I said is get the x's alone. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Okay. And this is going to get a little tricky for me with the typing. So I'm going to try with the writing. So I'm going to try it this way. So I get x squared minus 10x equals negative 7. Okay. Now the way I normally do this is I will write a plus a blank. And I'm actually going to do that here too. And the reason is I'm going to change this. The first thing I did was subtract 7. I got the x's alone. And remember, whatever you add to one side, you need to add to the other. So in this blank, I'm going to do what we did on the previous slide, which is, okay, well, what do I need to do to complete the square? What number would go here? So I would take half of negative 10, I'd square it, that's 25. Okay, and in this blank, I would also do 25. Okay. When I simplify that down, I get that this equals 18. And now I have the left side right here is a trinomial square, which is perfect because that's exactly what I already learned how to do in 6.4. You can go back to those notes if you need to. Mr. Lewis's video on 6.4 or 6.5. 6.5 is also up. So from here I'm going to factor that side. So I get x minus 5 quantity squared equals 18. Okay, from there I'm going to square root both sides, and I am not exactly sure how to make the square root symbol on a computer. So square root x minus 5 squared equals the square root, oops, sorry, oh wait, there it is, sorry. I'm going to square root that. Okay, and this, I'm doing all the steps kind of in one place right now. Equals that square root of 18. Move that down now. And I get the absolute value of x minus 5 equals the square root of 18, which you can use your calculator for that one. about 4.24. Okay. I'm going to continue this down here. And so then I take that and I say x minus 5 equals 4.24. X minus 5 equals negative 4.24. And if you don't know what I'm doing, go back to the this is now 6.3 videos. So I get x equals 9.24. And I get x equals around 0.76, an approximation. If you plug these numbers back in for x here, you should get that they equal 0 or real close. We rounded, so there is going to be some rounding error there. So again, if you read through 1, 2, 3, I've kind of written out the steps for my verbal learners, so you'll see over here. So I'm going to do it again with this next problem. So the first thing I look at is x squared plus 6x plus 4 is not a trinomial square. I can tell because 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared does not equal 4. So the very first thing I'm going to do is get the x's alone. Okay, I'm going to put plus a blank. I don't force you to do that, but I have to tell you, pretty much everybody who does that does fine. The minus 4 is coming from that I subtracted 4 from the left side, and 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So that's where that minus 4 came from. And I'll put plus a blank because in an equation, whatever you add to one side, you must add to the other. Okay. I'm going to fill in that blank. Let's change the color here for a second. With a 9. Because half of 6 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So now down at the bottom, and this becomes 5. Well, now my left side is a trinomial square. That's what you were forcing. You were completing the square. You were forcing it to become a trinomial square. So that left side now factors into x plus 3 quantity squared equals 5. Then I'm going to square root. Sorry about that. I'm going to square root both sides, which we just saw how not easy that is. So I'm just going to do this. Okay. Once you square root both sides, now you have the absolute value of x plus 3. Again, you guys are going to use the notations. It's hard for me because I can't type them in smart software. Equals, and we'll find out what the square root of 5 is. And I believe it's about, 2.24. Now you split it. Now again, some of you use the Mr. Lewis like plus minus. That works for me too. Whatever works for you. So I get x equals negative 5.24 and x equals, no, I'm sorry, that's not right. This one is negative 5.24 and this one is negative 0.76. Okay. So those are my two solutions to the equation. Solving the quadratic equation, I had to do this extra step of completing the square because the left side wasn't a trinomial square already. Okay, so here are two problems. I'd like you to write these down and try them on your own. So please push pause now, and then after you have done them, push play again. Okay, I'm going to go through these for you. Minimal explanation, I think I'll just type as I go. So if you're wondering where the negative 3 came from, it came from 0 minus 3. I subtracted 3 from both sides. I'm going to complete the square, change that color for you. So half of negative 8 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. Make sure I add that to both sides. Usually the biggest mistake you guys make is not adding it to both sides. So that's kind of why I'm changing the color so you really see that. So I get 16 here. This becomes 13. Okay, and now it is a trinomial square. I'm going to square root both sides. Now I get the absolute value. X minus 4 equals 3.61. Okay, and I solve each of those. I get x equals 7.61, x equals 0.39, and I have my two answers right here. And for the last one, okay, and you get negative 0.53. Okay, so those are the two answers. There are still possibilities of no solution here. If you solve for one of these and you see right here that it equals a negative number, you'll even see it right here. You would end up square rooting a negative. This didn't happen in the examples I gave you, but if that does happen, then there is a no solution here. That's that idea of those graphs where we had kind of like the smile and there was no intersection with the line below it. So this is still possible to have a no solution. The examples I gave did always had solutions. The other one I didn't talk about, and you're not really going to have in your homework, but if there was a number here in front of the square, we never went over how to make those a trinomial square. So if you got to one of these and there was a number in front of the squared term, you would just divide everything by that number and then do what you've been doing. So it's just that extra